In again.
Oh no, here we are. Sorry
Okay.
guys, we had some trouble getting started. Hello everybody, we're here today to talk about all of the chapters from John 6 to the end of Cat 8 in A Game of Thrones, and I'm here with the wonderful Clare Gray, as
Hi
usual for
everyone.
your Sunday discussion. So actually we were just nattering, we didn't actually talk about Game of Thrones at all before we started.
Didn't.
Um what did you think of this week's? Were you
I found this a mixture of very short chapters where I didn't really get more than a couple of sentences, and then really long, detailed chapters. At least a couple of them. There's I think a John chapter that's very long, a Bran chapter, a Cat chapter. So a mixture between very short and very long chapters. So the pacing
yeah.
felt slightly different for this session.
I found
Yeah.
it a little bit jarring between chapters that were really action heavy and
Mm,
chapters that were really lore heavy.
yeah.
And especially that John chapter going into Bran, I found that a
Yeah.
big kind of adjustment. Because that John 7 chapter, and I didn't realize we had two John chapters this week either. Um, but yeah, the John 7, like it's
Yes.
one of the best examples of horror writing or horror writing in the entire series. It's just a bit jarring going into Bran because I felt it a bit of a slog going through Bran's chapters because I was filling in the gaps of all of his knowledge for him.
See, I thought they fit together quite well because it was very centered around the old gods and the old religion
Yeah,
and things of the
thematically it
north.
makes sense. I just that
Yeah.
pacing just
Oh
kind of
yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
that just kind of caught
Yeah. Definitely.
like you're really like just like hyper like jacked at the end of John's chapter, then you go into Bran's chapter and it just gets very, very political and very
Yes.
like folklore. But yeah, anyway, we'll start with John 6 first, which is chapter 48. And this kind of leads on from the John chapter we had last week, where he went to Aemon and asked for asked for Sam to be accepted as like his kind of assistant, as Aemon's assistant, and
Yes.
to be one of the stewards. Um, and John kind of loses it in this chapter when he is also assigned to the stewards. So
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get a huge amount out of this chapter, just a couple of things, but I'm interested to hear what did you take out of this chapter?
Well, I think again this sets up the as readers beginning to think about what the difference between the North and the South and the North religion and there's a lot of I've just kind of if I had to describe this particular chapter in one word, I would say vows. So it's about vows. It's about vows to the Night's Watch. It's and also the fact that the vows are said. I think there's something different between the vows being said in front of the idols or the effigies of the seven in the new religion, in the south religion, and the old gods where you're actually kneeling down and saying your vows in front of the god. So when the vows say bear witness to my words, I think it just seems more powerful to me saying that in front of the actual god rather than like just the idol or the effigy of the seven. It just seemed to be the vows seem stronger connection to that old religion. I also, in the same vein, was thinking about Sam. I mean, ultimately, the idea I think is that Sam's going to become a Maester, or at least that's his journey where we know him in the books now. He's in Oldtown, and then it just got me thinking about: are there any Maesters at all that serve in the realm as we know it at this point in the story who would serve the old gods rather than the seven. And if the Maesters are ultimately linked to, because there's this intrinsic link, isn't there, in with the High Towers and Old Town, between the faith and the Maesters order. There are definitely, I think they're rooted in a similar place, certainly geographically. And that just made me wonder about, much later on in the books, when we meet Barbary, what's she called? Is it Barbary Dustin? Up in Winterfell, for like much later on in the story, and she's describing the Maesters as grey rats, and the Maesters don't seem to be. They seem to be in the north, but not of the north and not of the old gods' religion. So I just thought that was really fascinating, that Sam, who comes from the south, has denounced his religion to say his vows to the old gods, but ultimately become a Maester. Will he be kind of like breaking the mold in that respect, in that he can be a Maester but linked to the old gods and the old religion?
I always get I am so suspicious of the Maesters anyway. Maesters. I'm always really suspicious of them. And yeah, that's a good point, that maybe he will use that as a way of, whatever knowledge he gets through that new faith, he might use that as a way of building on the learning and the intellectual advances that the Maesters kind of look for. So, because Lewin says in the Bran chapter that they're knights of the mind, doesn't he? The Maesters or whatever. So,
yeah. And again, the difference, like there's a lot of magic linked to the old gods and the old religion in the north, and the Maesters, particularly Maester Lewin, a couple of times up to now, and in this section of chapters, is kind of like, it's like anti-magic. So the Maesters versus, so it just seems to be, the two don't seem to sit comfortably. Maesters in the north.
And is there a Maester's vow? Do they have to take some sort of vow? Do we know anything about that? It'd be interesting to see if we'll ever see Sam having to take a vow in addition to the one he's just taken for the Night's Watch.
Well, they must take some kind of vows, because they're celibate. They have to kind of like relinquish things in order to join the order. But then there's the chains as well, and like we were talking about last week, it's like that it's a physical embodiment of kind of being enslaved, wearing chains constantly, and there's it's noted that they're not removed ever, like 24/7. Lewin doesn't, they sleep in the chains. So it's enslaved to something. There are just some questions, I guess, to ask about North versus South, old gods versus new gods, religion, magic versus don't believe in magic, it's all made up. There's just some observations, but John took it as a personal slight about being a steward, but I think again, I think Sam is being brave at this point, just saying to him, hang on a minute, you're being groomed for command, this is actually a good thing. Again, that's an incredibly brave thing to say, and there's a couple of times, especially in the next chapter, where I made a note of, Sam says a lot, he proclaims all the time that he's craven, that he's a coward, but his actions don't demonstrate that at all. He's actually very brave, and even John thinks about this a lot. Sam has accepted his fate like a man, and that he was brave under certain circumstances. So yeah, I like Sam. He's one of my favourite characters. Just the point that I'm sure has been made before, certainly by other people, and I think we might have made it ourselves, Catherine. But the vows containing the words "watcher" on the walls, plural.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's kind of all I got really from this chapter.
Yeah, I mean the thing I liked about the vows, and it's an old conversation in the fandom, is how much detail we get about the Night's Watch vows in comparison to the Kingsguard vows. Now, granted, we haven't seen anyone take Kingsguard vows yet, really, so we don't really know them, but we know word for word what the Night's Watch vows are. It's just interesting that we don't know what the Kingsguard vows are. And there seems to be something amiss in the Kingsguard vows, or something that contradicts just from Jaime's actions, from gosh, he's gone out of my head. Arthur Dane's actions and things like that. So yeah, it's just interesting that we get the Night's Watch vows. There's a couple of things that I think there's a couple of important like bits of information that we get in there apart from the vows. Alistair's eyes being described as obsidian, and it's not even like, he doesn't even use assimilate to describe them. He just says his eyes are obsidian. So I thought that was quite interesting, and I wondered, will that come back to be important later on? Something about his eyes. Then we have Jon, when he flies into his fit of rage, he says, world be damned, or in his head it's like world be damned. I think that's one of the, for me, that has always been like a standout kind of piece of evidence that there's definitely a bit of Targ in him, and that there's something uncontrollable about his rage in him, which we see in other Targaryens, Viserys, Aerys. So there's something about Jon that sometimes he just can't control that rage. And yeah, he could feel the weight of the keys and the chains as he was looking at I can't remember who he's looking at, but just that idea, the weight of responsibility that he's going to feel as a steward later on. And then the other thing that I took was that there's only 2 or 3 trees that are allowed to grow together. So I thought that was interesting, or that do grow together, and you never see any more than 9 weirwoods grow together. I just wondered, I know like you're all about numbers and stuff, so I wondered, was there anything in that? And the last thing was that Ghost is likened to the weirwoods, and that horses aren't allowed into the weirwood because it would defile the weirwood, which is like the Dothraki in reverse, who allow their horses in everywhere but won't allow any kind of blood to be spilled. Where we'll find out later that blood is really important to the weirwoods, and blood should be spilled regularly, maybe around Godswoods. So I thought that was interesting, that there's a Dothraki in reverse kind of thing happening there.
Yeah.
But yeah, just kind of, there's actually a lot of information about weirwoods here. You just kind of, it's in hindsight you realize how much it is, I guess. But yeah, that's all I have. It's the next Jon chapter, the big one, where a lot happens. And then we have Ed's chapter, and I don't have much on this chapter. I find this chapter so hard to read when you know what's going to happen. It's Ed 14.
It's hard. This is the chapter where Ned is betrayed.
Yeah.
And again, I like the he's got different styles of writing. I think you're right. There's a couple of horror chapters really well written in this segment. But there's also that kind of edge of the seat thriller as well, where it's, you know, this sets up like, oh, Cersei is really evil. I mean, we thought she was a bit of a bad egg before, but this is like really shitty, underhand, horrible behavior. So immediately you get that kind of, you know, you as a reader going forward, this is just the first book, but as we go forward into the story, these are the things that kind of peg you to this is how I feel about this character. And it was just that, you know, oh, she's, you know, basically she bested Ned completely, and you know, it was, but it was very edge of your seat, because it was like, you know, just as Ned was asking the small council for support, and Barristan had been, because I again, these are the kind of details that I forget from years and years ago. The last time that I reread the books, I completely forgot that, like, a lot of people were witness to this letter existing, and that it had Robert's seal on it. I just, it did a very good job of making me believe that it was a very flimsy paper shield, and Cersei was able to just get rid of all of that and sweep it to one side immediately proclaim Ned as being the traitor.
But how much do you think this is Cersei, and how much do you think it's Littlefinger whispering in Cersei's ear and giving her the confidence to do this?
Oh, completely Littlefinger influencing both.
Because I don't think she would have done it only for Littlefinger was there manipulating it. Like,
yeah,
she would, even if she'd had, I don't know, even if she'd had Jamie there, I don't think she'd have done it. I think she has to have someone smarter in the room than
well,
she
yeah, but she does have her own little spies as well.
She does,
you know,
yeah.
like Littlefinger's pointed out, that's that they report who reports to who, when he was pointing out to Ned that time, like the corruption and the nest of vipers that Ned realized he'd arrived in. But yeah, I think it was just very well done, the way that it, you know, it just turned completely on a penny, where Joffrey's, you know, demanding a coronation, and there's like, well, nobody will question. And it was just the power dynamics of, like, things like that happening. And again, if you go back to the small folk, don't know any of this. They don't know the details of these kinds of shenanigans.
No.
They don't even know what the king looks like. But all of this is kind, you know, this is uber Game of Thrones. This is the actual the political gameplay.
Yeah, which Cersei understands and Ned doesn't. And it's like with Cat, there should be instant alarm bells when he walks into the throne room, because she's wearing a sea green silk dress and lace, and she's like dripping with nothing. And then later, when it's a public meeting with Sansa, she's wearing black. So, like, there's red flags all over the place when he's walking in. And like the whole way I went through the chapter, and I was just looking at how much it's repeated. You know, Littlefinger gave Ned his arm to lead him. Littlefinger, or Ned supported by Littlefinger. You know, all these kind of things are like Littlefinger is just like leading him into this trap, and it's so difficult to read. It's horrible to read.
It's just this. There was never going to be a way out. I mean, even the sort of plan B of, like, just side with Renly and get, because it was all about, again, this is where it makes you think about any potential power struggle or possible battle up and coming. You have to think about the numbers. And because Ned never had, he was never ever going to get out of this alive, ever, whichever way he turned. It was, he'd either burned his bridges, or he'd left himself in a completely vulnerable situation, with just Littlefinger to, I mean, yeah, very, you know, so we see lots of things. We see how nasty and ruthless Cersei can be. We can see how manipulative and just like the puppet master that Littlefinger is in this type of situation, and just how Ned was so out of his depth. I mean, he may have been able to uncover things and reveal certain things and realize the situation he was in, and dream about going back to Winterfell and all the regrets and everything that he had, but he was doomed as soon as he arrived. And this links back to this is a later chapter where with Bran, where I'm going to mention about people leaving Winterfell and going south and never coming back again. And, you know, that's just that was never going to happen with Ned. He was never going to make his way back to Winterfell.
So my question is, Renly. So we find out at the very beginning, Renly's gone, Loras has gone with him. How did Littlefinger tell Renly to leave? And had Renly stayed, would Littlefinger have turned? Would Cersei have turned against Renly? What how was Littlefinger betting on either going with Renly or Cersei, or was he always going to go with the Lannisters? This is what because we'll never know with Littlefinger probably, but it's one of those things that, like alternative history, I like to think about what the alternative history.
Well, I think Renly knew about the illegitimate.
Yeah, but then Littlefinger did too, right?
Yes, yeah. So it was a it was a sort of unspoken secret with a few people, it seems.
It seems to me that Renly would be a much more pliable monarch for Littlefinger than Joffrey and Cersei. Now he does get Ned killed through Joffrey, but I bet he would have convinced Renly to kill Ned too, potentially. Because remember, Ned would have thought that Stannis should be king. So
yes. So well, he proclaims Stannis as the heir.
Yeah. So I wonder, was Littlefinger just going to see? Okay, this would just see what Renly does. Depending on what Renly does, either way, Ned is fucked. Okay, but whether the Lannisters are whether Littlefinger is going to side with the Lannisters or not, I wonder. I was just wondering about that. But yeah, overall, very difficult chapter 3. I also think Barristan kind of.
And it's.
Sorry.
No, I was just going to say it's quite sad. I don't remember this detail, but Syrio was actually planning Winterfell.
Yeah. And speaking of Syrio and Arya, we're moving on to, I think it's one of the top 5 most important Arya chapters in the entire series, maybe even top 3, definitely top 5, but definitely her most important chapter in this book, I think, just for the level of foreshadowing, and that's why I'm wearing my Cat of the Canals t-shirt, which is foreshadowed in this chapter. So this is chapter 50, and so Arya is busy water dancing with Syrio, and they're talking about going back to Winterfell, and she is like, this is the last time we're going to see Arya happy. I feel this is her happiest. Like, she could not be more happy at this point. She's even thinking fondly of Sansa at this point. And she's making progress, and he says you can start using needles soon. And he tells her this strange story, which I always struggle to find meaning in, but it goes on for so long that there must be something in it. But about the fat yellow cat, and it's just a fat yellow cat, which makes me wonder, is that supposed to allude to Joffrey, or that he's just a fat yellow cat, he's no right to be king? I'm not sure. Maybe you can tell me.
Well, I mean, it has been said before, and I completely agree that Syrio, a big purpose really for Syrio, whether he's alive or dead, and I know that it's a fan favorite theory that, is Syrio still alive? Could he have? In my mind, no, he wouldn't have been able to fight off Trant. Trant appears later on, alive and well, later in the chapter. So no, he wouldn't have been able to survive that. As spirited as he was in his last fight, no.
Unless he's a faceless man and managed to quickly swap faces.
Yeah, but I can't see it. I mean, it was like 6 against 1. He had a wooden sword, and he did the best that he could, and he took 5 of them down. I think his character and the purpose of his character is an enormous metaphor, again, for how we as readers, that I think this is George talking to the reader as, here's some clues about how to read these books, because I do layer them with clues. I am aware that you'll go back and reread. I know that there'll be theories about things, and so I'm going to put like red herrings in, and I'm going to make you think about theory casting and this kind of thing. So when Syrio talks about, and I know that this has been said numerous times before, watching is not seeing, that's, to me, that can be interpreted as reading, just reading the words, reading the text doesn't necessarily mean knowing, because you, again, bear in mind that this is all through point of view characters, and a lot of it as well, especially the sort of theories around where this story ultimately is going and what it means and where it's going to end, is a lot of it is like prophecies through dreams and just completely unreliable sort of source material. So yeah, I think when Syrio says watching is not seeing, look with your eyes, these are massive bombs that George is dropping as clues to the reader about how to interpret the story. And
I totally agree, and I think especially when Arya, one of his mantras, which is never do what they expect. So like that's, which is, if we're getting our bittersweet ending, like George has said, Arya is definitely the wild card. She's the wildest of wild cards, and it's hard to know what she's going to do. So yeah, no, I totally agree with you. But I just I love this chapter because we get that line, "She was the cat now," and obviously is the foreshadowing cat of the canals. Yeah, and there's a lot about relying on her senses first and thinking later, which is what Arya is going to be. But then when push comes to shove, and when she is in a deadly situation, her default is John's lesson, which is stick them with the pointy end. And that,
which was the first lesson, the very first lesson. So she's actually carrying out the first lesson. So that's not to say she hasn't taken on board what Sirio's saying, but yeah, I thought that was really interesting.
The trauma of that murder as well is horrific. That boy, when he's dying and he says gods and he says take it out, like, because he thinks that's going to help, and she takes it out and he dies. It's like, oh my god, like that. She can never be okay. Anybody who is under the impression that Arya can go back and sit by the fireplace in Winterfell, it's not going to happen. It's never going to happen. This child is never going. You can't see something like that as a child and be okay.
No, just
do something like
traumatized. That. Yeah, completely.
Yeah. And I did love the line where she said, where is it now? They have orders not to let anyone out, and anyone is stressed in my book. So I was thinking anyone, but she's no one, or she will be no one. So I really like that. There's also, she's climbing through windows or something, and she hears one woman weeping, and I just wondered, maybe we're supposed to know who that is. I don't know. And then we have that memory.
Could have been Jane Poole, because Sansa refers to Jane Poole crying a lot.
That's true. Yeah, that's who it is. Yeah. Then we have the memory of the crypts, which I'll come back to again later on with John. But we have Rob telling her that this is where the dead walk. And I just wonder, do the Starks genuinely believe that? I know he was making a joke so that John would frighten them. But I wonder, is there somewhere where they just kind of accept that there is such a thing as ghosts and things like that? And then Rickon isn't alive in that memory. It's Bran is a baby in that memory. But Sansa instantly runs off and just leaves the four of them down there, which also makes me worry. Hi, AU. How are you? That also makes me worry. What do you think, AU? Is that foreshadowing as she runs off and leaves the four of them down there? That makes me worried. Because later on we're going to have and Arya goes deeper into darkness. And later on, we're going to have Jon remembering old Nan's stories, sitting at old Nan's feet with Bran, Robb, and Arya. Like, no mention of Sansa again. So yeah, that worries me.
Well, this is the chapter where Arya is now on the run, and this is where her story transforms from the daughter of the Hand to she's on the run. And but just going back to what you were saying before about the cat and Syrio, again, I think that's the same metaphor for Syrio saying, you know, yeah, you just it's just in plain sight. It's what you're actually, it's there, but you embellish it to think it's something else, or you think that it makes more sense if you say it's something else, but actually the reality is it's just a cat, but you can't maybe see it because you're watching it rather than seeing it. It's like the difference between when I'm training and I've got a really loud projector if I'm doing a PowerPoint presentation, and sometimes electronics are really loud and they let off all this like dry electricity, or there may be traffic outside, but I can hear those things, but I'm not listening to them, but I still know they're there. It's the same sort of thing. It's like you're seeing it's there, the text is there, but you're skipping over it because you're being led somewhere else. And I think, again, that's like all wrapped up in Syrio being a huge metaphor for a vehicle, a character vehicle for George to be able to say, this is how you should be. Here's some clues for how you should be reading this saga. So that's all I've got really from this chapter.
Sorry, I was taking a drink and I didn't want to be really loud. Yeah, no, that it's if you haven't read Arya 4 from Game of Thrones in a while, I would definitely recommend going back and reading it. And I think of all the chapters we've read so far, there's a few like the Ned, Ted as well. But I think this one is yeah, I do like going back and reading this one a lot. And yeah, AU says, that's a thought I missed, but I don't concentrate on Sansa very much. How dare you? And also he says, wow, that's deep, Clare. I mean, we expect nothing else, would we, AU? Yeah, I worry about that chapter a little bit. I also wonder what else haven't we seen from that chapter come true yet? Especially the Cam is still water thing, which I think will be, like they've definitely done that in the show, right? How calm she is, when she gets into, you know, assassin mode. So I think they maybe adopted it that way, but I wonder will we see it in another way?
I think this is the biggest, as well as the first lesson, sticking with the pointy end. The thing that seems to be coming through again and again and again, there are different words that she's hearing from Syrio playing back in her mind over and over again, but the one that comes up more than the others is fear cuts deeper than swords. Fear cuts deeper than swords. Yeah. So this is her, I think this is a transformation of her character, convincing herself that you cannot be scared, or at least don't show anybody that you're scared, because the minute that happens, it's you're dead. You're dead.
Or so when you don't have a sword, become the thing, become something that is to be feared. Yeah.
So it's a again, it's a blueprint for Arya's future character and actions and personality and story arc. From here on in. She ran from that situation. Syrio said, run, child, run. And she's not really stopped running yet. This is the beginning of her being on the run.
And we didn't even talk about the fact that she walks through all of her father's men, all of the northern men dead. Like there's nowhere to go. And the next Arya chapter is awful. So yeah, it is. It's kind of terrifying how quickly Arya becomes the Arya we know. She's one of the first. I want to say she's the only character at this stage that has made that looks like the Arya we know later on. Like it looks as much like already. She looks as much like what she looked like later on. Jon maybe too, but Jon still has a lot to get through. But Arya, I mean, she'll go through other horrible things, especially at Harrenhal. But by the end of Game of Thrones, Arya has gone through pretty much the most traumatic things she can ever go through. So yeah. And then we move on to Sansa, and I really like the way we've had 4 chapters from Arya, and now we're into Sansa 4 as well, back to back, because they won't see each other again now. Well, Arya will see Sansa, but they won't meet again. And yeah, this is the chapter. So that chapter with Arya is the chapter where everybody falls in love with Arya's character for who she's going to be as a character. This is the chapter that everybody hates Sansa for. This is the one people cannot get over when they talk about how much they hate Sansa. And it's hard to defend her in this, but even Bran tries to defend her in his chapter, I think. But yeah, I think I can't offer a defense at this stage, except that I think she's in survival mode. And I think her default is, I need to get married. I need to be a lady. That's what I need to do. That's my duty. That's my future. This is the best option for me. But other than that, I just wonder would she be different if Lady was around?
I'm sure she would get some kind of strength from Lady, and I'm certain that each of those direwolves are specifically called individual names for a reason. About ghosts in the crypts before, and the amount of dreaming that Jon has, and of course then there's his direwolf manifestation, and the name of his direwolf is Ghost, but she would have been getting Lady. But I also, again, it's certain things that you forget. Just kind of rolling my eyes at Sansa at the time when I was reading this the first time around, and also how she's portrayed in the TV show. You know, she's a silly, naive little girl who believes in all the fairy tales, and she's queen and have her Joffrey, and she completely just screws everything up for the sake of wanting to be Joffrey's wife. And it's not really, reading through this chapter, I don't feel that at all. I do feel that see the difference, realise the difference between the songs and the tourneys and what the actual reality is. And I think her default mode is to force herself to behave like a lady. That's it's like the fear of that situation for Sansa is default into how I'm expected to behave. So already it's this kind of captive mentality of, I'll do whatever I need to do to survive. And she forces herself, like it's a security blanket, I think, to become a lady and act like a lady. She lets it, and she gets strength from that. She lets it slip now and again, and that's when she begins to immediately feel terrified and like she's a little girl again.
Sorry guys, I'm back. I dropped out there. I hope Claire didn't drop out as well, but
no. Well, I don't think so. I've just been carrying on. I think that
I totally agree with you on the Sansa stuff as well. Totally.
I also think that Sansa was trying to save her father's life. That's what she was trying to do. She's been told that her father's a traitor. A number of things could happen, and she's hoping that he can either go over to Essos and just disappear and go into exile, anything, if she agrees to write this letter. So she's thinking this, she's in her own way, she's trying to broker a deal that saves her father's life, rather than, oh, this frivolous, she wants to be with Joffrey, so she's prepared to drop her entire family in it. That's not how it went down. She was completely cornered. And again, the difference between the TV show and the books: in the TV show, she goes to visit Cersei in the Queen's Solar, I think, and there's maybe one or two other people. Here, Cersei's got the numbers and the force of the entire small council. There's absolutely no way in that situation Sansa would have been able to get out of not writing that horrible letter. But we see later on in Cat's chapter that they know what's happened, and they know that it's Cersei's words. So, you know, in story, they understand that. But I think, yeah, this is a huge wealth of hatred towards Sansa as a character. For, oh, she's the horrible sister, and Arya's the hero.
Let's not be too forgiving, because
Mm-hmm.
her treatment of Jane is pretty awful, and she does forget about her sister completely.
She does. She remembered right at the very end of the day that she'd forgotten to ask anything about Arya. Again, yeah, she is. There's no doubt that she's not a very princessy, kind of wrapped up in her own world, entitled brat.
Yes.
I'm not saying that's not her at all, but the situation she was in this particular scenario versus Cersei, she had no chance.
Oh no, and I totally agree with you. No, and I am definitely playing devil's advocate here, because I'm totally in the grey zone with Sansa at this point, and I think compared to her siblings, Sansa is so far away. Even now, as we go into Winds of Winter, I think she's so far away from who she will be at the end of this series in comparison to the others, because she hasn't got Lady, and because she's been basically doing it on her own the entire time. And actually, if we look back at Arya's memory, when we look back at Jon's memory, and later with Bran, she's always been separate from them. She's always been isolated away from them, because she's been like put into this narrative from the moment she was born, saying, you're beautiful, you're going to be the lady, you're going to be the one that we'll send out into the world and marry off to the whatever kind of lord we can. Whereas Arya didn't get that, because she was a tomboy, she wasn't that good looking, she was kind of born in the middle of all the boys, so she kind of gets away with living as a kid, whereas Sansa doesn't. And I'm with you that I think she is in survival mode. But like Rob, there's a lot of, and like Rickon, I actually think Sansa and Rickon have the most in common, because Rickon is completely neglected as well, and he goes wild. But where he goes wild, Sansa gets more conservative and rigid. And like you said, like her survival mode is to follow the rules, and that'll save her. And it does save her. Can I just ask about Jane Poole, because Jane Poole is one of the most horrific stories in the entire series. Why is Cersei afraid of Jane Poole, and why is she angry for them having put Jane Poole? Because sure, she might, have a couple of stories to tell her, but is there something else that she could have? Could she have led Sansa astray?
I think she just didn't want Sansa gaining any kind of strength or comfort from anyone. So why did she have a companion with her? So that would have annoyed Cersei, because that's kind of, she's been treated well in the confines of how Cersei wants her to be treated well, which is to be isolated and to feel vulnerable, and if she's got a friend there with her, I think that's probably, or just a control freak Cersei thing of like, I didn't know about that. How did I not know about that?
Because she says, I don't want her filling her head with any stories. And I just wondered if Jane Poole was there saying this isn't right. They've killed all the Stark men. They've killed my dad. They've got your dad. Will Sansa start to realize the truth, and then she won't be able to be manipulated as much. But yeah, it's just and Littlefinger takes her, and that doesn't work out well for Jane. But yeah, so that is the infamous Sansa chapter where I don't recommend going back and reading Sansa 4 because she's on her way from leaving that Sansa behind. And yeah. I think she'll reference this chapter again. By the way, that letter that she sends comes up in Kat's chapter again, which I never really thought about before. That would still be at Winterfell, which is important for this for show watchers. It never occurred to me that letter was never received. Kat's letter was never received until Rob tells Kat that he left it behind. And I wonder what's in it. Probably nothing more than what's in Rob's, but
yeah. There's just another couple of things that I wanted to point out about this chapter. I thought that I think you can tell how far Littlefinger's reaches, because maybe sometimes he is overreaching a little bit and he's getting a bit too big for his boots, because I did think it was rather rude for him to say directly to Cersei in front of the whole small council, "Do you take me for a fool?" When she was advising him what to do with Jane Poole. I also thought that it was a bit creepy that Sansa felt naked when Littlefinger looks at her. And he also refers to, he talks about Sansa being the image of Cat at that age. Yeah, she's the image of Cat at the same age, which was just, yeah.
Sorry, Claire, can I interrupt you there? You are welcome next week, no problem at all. That would be brilliant.
Yes, wonderful. Yeah, please do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of all I got really from that, which is I felt that perhaps in my own mind I'd been quite harsh on Sansa in the past and blaming Sansa for the situation that happened with Ned and everything else that happened afterwards. And I read that chapter thinking that's not necessarily the case. What else could she have done in that situation?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I can see why people don't like her, but we have to remember that she's a child at this stage. And as Bran says later on, she doesn't have Lady with her, so she's not really operating with her full Stark capacity, I guess. So then we go into John 7, which is chapter 52, and this is a proper little horror chapter, a long chapter. But this is where we get whites, and we get pretty gruesome scenes. Much more gruesome, I think, than the prologue. But yeah, they find the dead brothers in the woods just beyond the wall, and it's sad. Well, John can kind of sense the dark magic, and so can the animals. And he says to Sam at one stage, I think it's him that says to Sam anyway, what good are eyes if they're shut? Which kind of made me think of Arya and Sansa, the two chapters that we came from, like, just try and see what's in front of you. And Sam shows himself to be like really valuable here.
Yeah.
CSI Night's Watch, CSI Wall.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And yeah, and the idea that John remembers hearing about whites from old Nan when they sat around old Nan, him, Arya, Rob, and Bran. And I mentioned this already. No Sansa and no Rickon. Rickon's probably too young, but no Sansa. And I wondered why Sansa wasn't there, but the rest of them were. And the fact that Ghost isn't afraid. And we get this mention, which I don't know if this is mentioned again, Spirit Summer. The fact that there's a Spirit Summer. at the moment,
Mm.
and it's really hot and humid. And they call it.
Oh yes, which indicates this is kind of a freak weather
summer, yeah,
occurrence, which means that it's a sign that there's going to be a very long winter. Yeah, yeah,
yeah. I guess it's like the equivalent of an Indian summer, like what we'd call in Ireland and the UK when it gets really, really hot. Is it? I
and
don't really.
maybe it relates back as well to like a false spring.
Ah, okay, yeah. Okay, and this is also the chapter where he finds out about Ned and being arrested for treason. A lot happens to John in this chapter. It's pretty horrendous.
And then there's the attack with the Whites.
Yeah, but then we have the attack of the Whites, and we also have John finding out that the Lord Commander is going to petition the Queen or the King to send Ned to the Wall, and John is kind of a bit like startled by that. And again, I like to play alternate history with that. How cool would it have been if Ned had ended up at the Wall? Now that would have been deadly. I would have enjoyed that. But
I did think it was like John had this teenage reaction of like, oh God, my dad's going to turn up just when things are getting like, I was just starting to feel comfortable.
I took over a whole tower so I can just have nice cheeky little wanks. Nobody will go around, and then my dad's going to come up and he's definitely going to want to share a bedroom with me and chat through the night. But I'll just ask him about my mom and
But, so he had, but in a more serious note, the fact that John sometimes has doubts about Ned, and he's, oh well, I mean, he does question this like outwardly. He's like, how dare any of you? None of you, you should never be calling my father a traitor. Absolutely not. No. But inwardly, he's thinking, hang on a minute, he did father a bastard like me. And could he have been, would that have happened? Would he have been a traitor? And he's thinking about King Robert and how he didn't necessarily sort of view him as very kingly, and so there are some doubts in John's mind there, which I thought was quite interesting. But outwardly, yes, he's like, how dare you question my father?
I have one big question from this chapter with the White attack. So we have the White attacking him in the Lord Commanders in the cells. Although I love the image, I don't love the image, but I like it. It makes me laugh. The image of Mormont completely naked, and just like, I don't know, for some reason, like there's something stupid in his hand, like a sausage on a fork or something, and he's just like, oh. And this White attacking. My question is, so the hand goes off and starts to climb up, the arm starts to climb up his leg, right?
Yes.
The hand, to be honest. How powerful are the Whites in terms of, like, I know the show has completely forgotten about that, obviously, that they conveniently forget about it sometimes, the way limbs can just operate independently of their host, I guess.
Yeah.
Is that the way they will operate, or is it that they're closer to the Wall? Is there something to do the magic? Will that like allow every part of the White to be more animated, or I'm kind of still a bit, because we still haven't seen a huge amount of them in the series. This is, I think this is one of the more descriptive scenes that we see. It
talks about their eyes a lot, the blue eyes of the corpses, and how obviously again that links back to and represents ice magic. It's pretty obvious that the Whites were deliberately heading for the Lord Commander, so they weren't just randomly wandering around like zombies on a killing spree. They seem to definitely be on a mission. So whether or not they're freakishly strong, I don't know, but I think if they're on a mission and they're determined and they're being controlled by another magical element, then
so if they so this is, I guess, an extension of my question. is there a sense, if they're all operating via some sort of hive mind control thing, if there is some sort of mission, can they kind of pump more energy into that white? Or if it's just a white who gets stabbed in the eye on his way out to pick berries, I don't know what they eat. Like, is he, if he dies, like, they don't need to keep making him operate and move. Like, I'm still fascinated, I guess, by the actual logistics of whites and what actually makes them move and what doesn't and all that kind of
Well,
thing.
I think there's definitely mind control.
Mm-hmm.
They're being operated, if you like. They're a hollow shell of a dead. I mean, if you think back to, I've got in my notes here lots of like arrows going backwards and forwards in this chapter, because a lot of what was earlier on in the chapter links to later on in the chapter. So John references Old Nan, and there's a couple of characters, I think, throughout this series that you pay attention to what they're saying, and because it's possibly more prophetic than some of the accepted prophecies, the historical prophecies. And I think Old Nan definitely is one. I think Hodor is, yeah. I think Ned Dane is another one. That's it. That's another. I mean, that's the other thing with Hodor as well, though. We do see two huge, bare, naked men in this section of chapters. There's Hodor and the Lord Commander. Yeah, I think that there's definitely a reason why Old Nan is referenced, and that she says the others hated men, hated iron and fire, and they moved in the darkness, leading an army of the slain. So that to me means some sort of mind control, and I can put you in a certain room. I can try to make you, like, you know, kill this particular person, and they were deliberately going for the Lord Commander. I think that there's something to be said about the animal's behavior. That again, it's this like magic and non-magic. And so these magical beings, so the whites are reanimated magical beings. The direwolves are magical beings, and so they're kind of on the same side, if you like. They're magical beings, which is why Ghost is like trotting around with a hand in his mouth, and doesn't mind, like, going for it, like getting involved and fighting with them. And whereas the horses that are taken beyond the wall, and the dogs, like Chet's dogs, they are non-magical creatures. They're on the other side. So I think that, where am I going with this? That's the reason why Ghost just doesn't seem that bothered at all, is because he is also a magical being. I do think that the whites are being mind controlled, and that the others are leading an army of the slain. This is where it all gets mixed up with the TV show, because I think I don't know whether the Night's King will ever be featured beyond just a tale in the of, like, the Long Night and the Heroes, the Age of Heroes, beyond just being referenced, whether or not he actually appears later on in, like, the next book as an actual being, or enemy. Do you think?
I think it'd be more terrifying if there isn't a Night King. If they,
yeah,
and it'd be a very George thing to do, to not have because we don't have a clear leader of the living. I think it'd be much more. No, I could be completely wrong, but I think it'd be much more George to get like this. Like, they're basically up against. They don't have one person that they can take out. It's very neat for TV that they've this one thing. If they kill him, like they've done it, because they only have 7 episodes left, something like that. So, as Dondarrion says, kill him and you kill the whole lot. It's like, oh, that's neat.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's going to be that neat in the book. Whether there will be a Night's King or not, I don't know. And I don't know if there has to be. It would be interesting if there's something pushing that army.
Just like a particular force, or
as you've said before, are they being drawn to something? They're not necessarily pushing themselves. They might be pulled.
Yeah.
You said that before in relation to Gilly's child.
Yes. Yeah, they may just be trying to retrieve that child. There's just a reference to Sam again. I've mentioned before about him keep saying that he's craven, but he doesn't act it, and he will do what's required, and like you say, steps into this like CSI, no blood, but the corpses are fresh. And later on, actually, when right at the end of the chapter, when Alistair Thorne is laughing and saying "traitor's bastard," and John throws himself, like he lunges at Alistair Thorne, and Sam actually throws himself between them, and that's like, wow, that's really quite a brave thing to do. So it's just he's telling everyone that this is who he is, that he's a coward and a craven, but he actually is, every bit of his actions does not display that.
AU asks, what is the benefit of Mormont dying to the Night's King? Good question. At this stage, I mean, it would leave them with a massive leadership vacuum. I mean, we know about Jon, but they don't know about Jon, I guess. But it's a good question.
I mean, it could be something as perverse as getting rid of Mormont because somebody knows that Jon needs to be Lord Commander and will be the next Lord Commander.
Well, and like one of the main reasons Jon ends up north of the Wall is because of Mormont. Maybe they don't want Jon north of the Wall. I don't know. It's a good question though. Also, he's a sexy naked man just walking around. They don't need that kind of competition in their lives. I mean, who does? So we have then, if that's everything for the Jon chapter, a great chapter though. I mean, so exciting. Yeah. And then we go into this Bran chapter, which I feel is just so dense with information that I actually had to go back over twice, and I'm still not sure if I got everything again. We're just thrown so many names and so many new characters. And as I said before, it's really folklore heavy. And just basically Rob gathering the North, which I felt like came out of nowhere. Not came out of nowhere, but it feels like it's rushed or something. And I'm not entirely sure who's pushing Rob into this. I feel like Maester Luwin, maybe a little bit. And then later on, Rob says he had to leave Maester Luwin behind because he doesn't have. He's a good counselor, but he doesn't have a head for warfare or strategic warfare.
Yeah.
That quote, but he says to Cat about something like that, which I thought was ironic considering that Luwin seems to be saying if he doesn't march now, he won't be able to march at all. Which I guess. But is there any evidence that Tywin is moving that quickly? Is there much evidence that Tywin is moving that quickly? I don't know. I'm a little bit. I'm a little bit slow on the uptake when it comes to military strategy, I have to admit.
Yeah, and there's a lot of that in this chapter, and
well, I have to learn fast for.
There's a lot of it later on in Kat's chapter where she gets herself involved in the military strategizing. But I think, I mean, there's a power void here. Everybody knows that Ned's been captured and is named as a traitor, so immediately there's this power void. And there's this feeling that the North needs to rise in support of their liege lord, and that his eldest son will kind of pick up the mantle. And then you get all of the Northern Lords approaching Winterfell, and it actually, again, when you think about the numbers, 12,000 men arriving, and through the through Bran's chapter, you get a sense really of how many people were there. I mean, they couldn't even fit them all in the hall, and that, yeah, it's just it's a very, very busy chapter with everybody arriving. Winterfell described by Bran as a sea of chaos.
Hi, Sonny. Thanks for joining us again.
Hi. I think, can I just talk about some of the things that I got from this chapter?
Of course, yeah. Work away.
Well, I think that there's a couple of things here just relating to Bran when he thinks about being carried around by Hodor in the basket that Maester Luwin has kind of engineered, and his first immediate thought about it is that it's not as good as riding Dancer. And I just thought, it kind of like already is just imagining Hodor as like this less than human. Just again, I hated whether or not that's going to happen in the books, I don't know. Apparently it is, and that's the big reveal about Hodor. But it just makes me feel even more uncomfortable, and just that first mention of Bran being transported around by Hodor, he says it's not as good as riding Dancer, which I just thought was disgusting, to be honest, the way that he kind of views Hodor. I thought it was interesting that since this has happened to Bran and he's been incapacitated by his injury, that he's suddenly more drawn to the old gods and the gods' woods. The gods' wood, he feels, he's visited a few times and he feels safe there, and he likes to pray to the gods. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just going through my notes, so please feel free to jump in. Rob's 15 at this point, and we can see this very quick but fairly systematic rise to power, leading to these immediate notions of marriage arrangements. Like everyone suddenly wants to marry Rob because he's suddenly elevated into this position of power.
Can I say my favorite one is the overweight 30-year-old that doesn't talk to anybody. Yeah. She's my favorite, and I think they overlooked her as a catch.
All these suitors being rolled out, but again, it just makes you think that where there's a power vacuum and where there's an immediate rise to power, like I'd think back a previous generation, the whole Brandon, Ned, Cat. You know, Robert was supposed to marry Lyanna, Brandon was supposed to marry Cat, and it just all seems to kind of like swap around. And it is that, like, if there's a power vacuum and an immediate rise to power, then there's this scrambling to make these marriage arrangements. And I think that might be something that happened with Hoster and Cat to get her into the north. I think that in terms of, there's a lot of, for me, sort of going back to what I said about Syrio before, lots of symbolism and clues for the reader. Loads and loads of examples here that when Rob is talking to Bran about how scared he is, and he admits that he feels scared, and he says there's all these like tales of untruths, like Ned was responsible for Robert's death, and that Arya and Sansa had been murdered. There's all this gossip and stuff whizzing around that are like versions of the truth, but not the truth. And I think that is a message for us as readers to pay attention to how stories are spread, because it doesn't necessarily mean the truth. There may be an element of the truth in it, but not the real truth, because that, you know, there's all of these examples that we're getting, and because we don't, you know, you can't just go onto Google and say and type in Ned Stark and get like a news update of exactly what's going on and what's happening in the capital. You just can't get that. So yes, there is a lot of gossip and rumors and half-baked truths and untruths wrapped in a truth, and you know, so you do pay attention to those messages, I think. Yeah, and then there's lots of different scenes actually in this chapter. We get later on in the chapter Osha, when they're in the Godswood.
That was my favorite part, I have to say.
Yeah,
the Osha part, because I don't think I paid attention. I don't think I paid enough attention to it before, and yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I felt again I started playing alternate history with that. I wondered what if Rob, in his with a childish impulse, decided I believe her, let's go north, or let's at least go up to the wall and see what the hell's going on, which would have probably coincided with the White arriving and the attack. It might have confused Joffrey and Cersei enough to spare Ned or to buy Ned time. I don't know. I like to play alternate history as to what kind of series we would have with that.
yeah.
Yeah, and also yeah, Usha's stories, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, we've been saying it since Bran 1. Like, there's a reason these people are fleeing, and there's a reason why you've executed so many deserters recently. Just, maybe listen to them. And yeah, and the things that Usha is willing to put up with. I mean, she's willing to be raped on a pretty much daily basis.
Yeah, I've just seen that Osha's been sexually abused, and that was just like passed over.
She's like, oh, it's not that bad. He's nicer than the other fella. It's like, Jesus, how bad was it up north of the wall? Yeah, and the thing I forgot, I think I just forgot about it, was Ghost biting off Umber's fingers, which is kind of funny. But I mean, I know that people look back to this chapter and the cat chapter for the Great Northern Conspiracy. For the first time we meet a lot of these houses. But yeah, and I just think that I love how Rob can be vulnerable with Bran.
Yeah.
But later on, when it's Cat kind of sensing vulnerability, but he never really is vulnerable with her.
Yeah.
He's definitely vulnerable with Bran. And it kind of gives you the impression that despite the fact that Bran dehumanizes Hodor, he is quite an empathetic character and a sympathetic character, and that isn't something that he can be if he wants to go on to be, Bloodraven or a demigod or whatever it is. He has to let go of that part of him, let go of the ego. So it's kind of I think you're right. The way he treats Hodor is terrible, but I don't know if that's really Bran. Or maybe it is. Maybe he's Sansa, the male Sansa. But yeah, I don't think there was anything else. Yeah, it was just the alternate history, and I do think Bran is very stubborn, and he refuses to give up on his idealism, and he listened to Osha. He's not going to stay in bed to be mocked. He's going to keep, maybe I can still be a knight. He's still like trying to, clutch at all these dreams and hopes. Which I think
he says he wants to. He says quite controversially that he wants to learn magic.
Yes.
And he says this to Master Lewin. Again, this is chunks of these chapters to me stand out as the magical element versus this doesn't exist. I'm refused to blah blah blah. I'm not listening to it. It doesn't. And that's reflected in like magical creatures, magical beings, non-magical beings. And you get Bran saying that he wants to learn magic, and Maester Lewin having none of it, and saying that he can. Why doesn't he be a Maester? Maester is a knight of the mind. Again, being a Maester, but having the old gods. Bran feels sorry for himself. I mean, he had all these lofty ambitions to be a knight, and he can't walk. So he's referring to himself as Bran the Broken. He is feeling sorry for himself. He is
broken though.
He's broken, and he wants, but he's got
he's broken psychologically. He just doesn't realize it. Yeah.
but he's got this yearning to want to learn magic. Interesting, I thought that Osha confirms, again, we get a lot of this old gods and old stories, and Osha confirming that giants do exist and that giant women have been known to take human men as partners and have like half hybrid babies. And then we, there's this theory that possibly, well, Osha mentions Hodor having giant's blood. That there's also this conversation about people who've gone south before in the Starks family, like Ned's father and Brandon and Ned and now Rob. They're leaving Winterfell to go south and they don't come back. And there's reference as well to
I think Clare is frozen. Hopefully we're still on the air. Yeah, so she was just talking there about the folklore that we get. I'm not sure if she knows she's gone yet. Nope, I think she's gone for a bit. She'll be back, I'm sure. Here she is, I think.
sorry.
You're okay. No problem at all. You were just talking there about Osha and the...
Yes, I was saying that she was talking about the old gods can't exist in the south because they don't flourish through the weirwoods. So that's a kind of like the weirwoods don't leave the north because they can't exist in the south. They wouldn't, and again, the Starks leave Winterfell, leave the north, go south, and they don't come back again because they can't, they can't exist in the south. They end up dying and never coming back, which I thought was quite poetic. And then again, whether or not it links back to this, there must always be a Stark in Winterfell. Maybe that's the reason, because they literally cannot exist in the south because the old gods don't exist in the south. There's mention as well of Sansa's letter arriving at Winterfell and father being a traitor. No mention of Arya and that lady was lost because they talk about her bones being returned to Winterfell. So I think that's all you need to know from that letter. And they've read it as, I don't think anybody thinks that this is from Sansa. I think everybody gets that this has all been under duress. So again, I don't think you can really blame Sansa for this. It's obvious that she didn't do it.
Yeah, yeah, it is. Yeah. My heart goes out to Rickon in this chapter, and how wild he is, and Rob saying, "Oh, is it in this chapter?" Yeah, it is. He says, "Oh, he's 4. He's old enough now." No,
yeah, no.
Even in this age, he's not.
Yeah.
But yeah, and he refused to come down to see Rob because he says, everybody that goes south doesn't come back, and he's not wrong. He is not wrong. A couple of questions I have for you, I guess bigger questions in relation to this chapter. How close to war do you think the North was, even without everything that's gone before it? Because Bran comments that the Winterfell is much more crowded now than it was for when Robert came to visit. Like, they don't sound like they were all that happy with Robert as king. But if it's Stark, they'll listen. They'll follow the Stark, no problem. But yeah, and I know we mentioned that when Robert was visiting, because he said, "Where's all the people?" And we were like, they're probably not interested in seeing you. So how close to a rebellion, for maybe was the North about to secede from Westeros or something? Yeah, so that was...
I get the impression from even at this stage, I've put in my notes, I wonder if the Boltons had been like coiled springs waiting for this, just waiting for this to happen, so that they can jump into action. Because again, there's the power void, and if you remove Ned, there isn't anybody else. His other brother is at the wall. He can't suddenly come back and become the Lord. So that you were talking about children. So if you're cunning and smart like the Boltons are, then yes, you're going to be able to see that this is ripe for the taking. And that's exactly what they were trying to do, obviously. But I do think that even at this stage, I think the Boltons and possibly the Karstarks as well were just kind of waiting for this to happen and just to kind of pounce on this opportunity.
They're definitely all out for what they can get. I mean, one of them, I can't remember who it is, says, "Oh, I'm not here to ask for anything, but I would like hunting rights here, and I would like access to this land over here, but I don't want anything for myself. I'm not offering you like marriage to a daughter or anything." But Sonny says, "I think if there are no Starks in Winterfell, something happens in the crypts." Totally possible. Did Rickon take a sword from one of the statues in this chapter as well? Don't they find him?
I'm not sure. I know Rickon runs off to the crypts, and that actually made me think about which of the Stark children seem to be drawn to the crypts through their dreams. I mean, Jon dreams a lot.
Arya
has and I think it's Arya, Jon, and Bran, and obviously
Sansa isn't.
To some extent, Rickon as well, yes, but not Robb and not Sansa.
Well, although we do have a story where Robb is in the crypts.
Yeah.
Through Arya's point of view, so the suggestion might be that he is. I think Rickon is a massive. I was thinking about this again today. I think he's a massive wild card in terms of a potential prologue for a Dream of Spring or something, or an epilogue, which would be terrible. But I think unless he's in a position to be King of the North at the end, he needs a point of view of some sort, because Robb didn't get one. But Rickon should have one, I think. AU says, "Me too. I think it started when Rickard died, and died the same time as Brandon." So I presume that's in relation to what you were saying, Claire. But I feel like the kingdom is just about to fall apart. And there was something I was actually going to point out with the Dothraki, that there's kind of a foreshadowing that the Dothraki are not going to be successful because they rely too much on the horses and not so much on the magic. Just in reference to what you were saying about the magic, I think that was with Jon's chapter. But and also the last question I had was in relation to the Whites. Do they have their own gods, I wonder, or is it the old gods, or do the old gods fight the Whites? That's a whole other stream in and of itself, just what the Whites are all about. And do they have green seers? I assume they do, because if we go with your theory that they definitely sent someone to kill Mormont, and just going by what Osha says, like, if you live north of the wall, it's very, very different. The Great Other is what our AU say. Thank you very much. So yeah, that probably answers my question. Okay, so then we're on to Dany, and this is Dany 6. I think this is the chapter I took the least out of, actually. I did feel like I've been really homey this week, and like very, I don't know what I'm doing, like nesting, even though I'm not nesting. But so I felt like this chapter
You're bedding in for the winter.
I think so. I was getting really snuggly. So yeah, this is like all about home. This like is so home orientated. And
very much. I was going to say exactly the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just so, it's really, apart from, her nearly dying, it's a very cozy chapter. But it's kind of, it goes between her wanting home and trying to take control of her life. And my big question is, where did Jorah go? Was he looking for assassins in this chapter? And also, is it okay that Khal Drogo is willing to fight for Westeros for Rhaego, but not for Dany? I'm thinking no, but yeah. So what were your thoughts on Dany?
I think, yeah, she's thinking about Westeros a lot, and I agree. This is very much about home. I thought it was interesting that, you know, it's mentioned that, and Dany talks about this herself, that she's never stepped foot in Westeros. Yet, some interesting things here. When she's walking through the markets, the Eastern market reminds her of wonder and magic, whereas the Western market smelt of home. Now, how can something of smell of home if you've never actually been home? So, of the red door, and then also she talks about the pentos sausages and the garlic and the hot pepper, which made me think that sounds like a Dornish dish.
Yeah, me too.
So
and the honey fingers.
Yeah, it just felt like, especially with the saying that the market smelt of home, you know, the sense of home is mentioned twice in this chapter, and I think, especially with the sense of smell, I think that's linked to strong memory triggers. And I do think that Dany has been in Westeros. She's just believed everything that she's been told, but she has these innate memories linked to things like sense of smell that you wouldn't have if you hadn't experienced that. So my questions were just about, maybe she was born somewhere else.
Like, why not conquer, like, Pentos or Bravos, or, you know, why not conquer the place where she thinks she was born, and then she's home?
I think she has set foot in Westeros before.
Yeah.
So my questions are, when did she leave? Where was she? Why did she have to leave? Why does she not think she was ever there?
Right, which one do you want me to tackle? Will we ever get answers to those questions?
Yeah, if anyone wants to kind of chime in. I think she was possibly born in Dawn. I know that MP has a theory that Stormborn isn't because she was born in the middle of a storm at Dragonstone. It was because she was born at Storm's End. That's why she's called Stormborn. And that she was trying to be smuggled out by the Onion Knight because she remembers like black sails. And yeah, it's very strange about Dany's origins, to be honest. She seems to remember differently from what she's been told. I thought that the brazier and the eggs and everything was just a theme of how these chapters have been going, the whole fertility and mother of mountains and womb of, you know, this kind of, it's all in the same vein, still based in Vaes Dothrak. And yeah, at the end, Drogo is so horrified that somebody tried to kill her that he vows to give his son the Seven Kingdoms. That's all I've got, really. Nothing beyond that. Just her thinking about Westeros, and that I think she's been there before. I think like there is one sentence at the beginning about the stallion, the prophecy that from the Dosh Khaleen, that the stallion needs to ride to the end of the earth. And my question was, I know that the Dothraki follow horses, and that's their whole culture and religion. But another massive feature of the Dothraki culture is they submit to power. They recognize power, and, you know, if somebody overpowers, they're ultimately, you know, they will bow down to power. And I just wonder whether or not the stallion that rides to the end of the earth could be a dragon rather than a horse. And there's that thing about the end of the earth being a few Bran chapters back, where he's having like visions, and he sees like beyond the land of always winter and this kind of curtain that's like the end of the earth. So the stallion that rides to the end of the earth, I'm just thinking, could that potentially be a dragon?
Yeah,
could that
totally.
be Dany? Yeah.
My new
That's all I
favorite
got.
word chapter is she refers to Rhaego, or her son, bestriding the world, which is my new
Yeah.
favorite verb. I'm going to try and work that into a lot of sentences this week. Sunny says, why does her brother Viserys talk about the night she was born? I kind of feel with Viserys as well, you're dealing with another traumatized kid.
Mm.
And whether he lies or not is one thing, but like we don't know what the hell Viserys went through, but it's a fair question. Yeah, yeah. AU definitely thinks that she's raised in Dorne. And Simon, hi Simon, how are you? Bastards from the Stormlands are named Storm, right? I believe so.
Stormborn.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
but he's suggesting that she's a bastard. Um,
Mhm.
how dare you? She's royalty. But yeah, no, it's yeah, it's another
Yeah.
one of those things. Will we ever need those answers, and will we ever get them? Uh,
Mm.
uh, George is very coy on it. When he's asked questions about this in interviews, and yeah, some people, they push him on things, and it's one of those things that he's not forthcoming with, I believe.
I do. I
And
think there was a
in
massive
Danny,
baby swap. I wouldn't rule that out. That there was some
no,
massive baby swap,
no,
and
and
that
yeah, the less tarred
because
looking one.
exactly the ones that had the white hair and the had to be kind of spirited away.
And people will still
And
have their other Targ story in the show. So, if you don't
yeah,
like that one,
yeah, you can always choose the other one. Yeah.
No,
Um,
I totally agree. I think there's something not right with Danny's background. But I love her putting the eggs into the fire here. I love that kind of, and I love the coziness of the chapter. I liked it a lot. Apart from she nearly getting. Oh yeah, I don't know if you answered my question about Jorah. Was he off looking for the assassin when he left her?
I think he had got. I think he was called away because he had an important message that from the, like call it off, call it off, call it off. Make sure
Of
that it doesn't happen.
course.
Everything's changed. You've got
That
to
makes
try and
more sense.
save her, and
Okay.
yeah. So I think
I
that's
thought
what.
I was seeing the good in him. I thought he was regretting being a snitch, and that he was
Mm,
looking for the assassin to try and stop the assassin on his own, just
mm,
off his own back. Let me see. Sunny is saying, I agree. Big baby swap between Lyanna and Ashara. It's a very
yeah,
long held fan theory for sure. Yeah.
yeah.
And totally plausible, I think anyway. Then we're on to the last chapter, which I feel is like it feels like the most Clash chapter. It really,
Mm,
like, I feel like all of Clash is like this in a sense. There's a lot of political intrigue, a lot of weird mummy son stuff, a lot of weird Tully Stark stuff, and a lot of Cat. She tells Rob to be certain. Like, if you're gonna make a decision, be certain about it.
mm,
And she's one of the least certain people moving on from this. And I don't know if she's ever been totally certain about the action she takes, but there you go. Yeah, so we meet the Manderleys, all huge and probably in need of the Biggest Loser or something. Um, and the descriptions are brilliant. The third son would have been the fattest man she'd ever seen had she not met his father and brother. It's brilliant. I love it. So she's with Brendan and they're moving towards Moat Cailin. Did you feel in this chapter there was a certain amount of Tully's looking down on the Starks, especially when they get to Moat Cailin and Brendan is like, "What's this? This place is in ruins." And Kat is like, "Oh, but Ned said that this is such an important place." And it's ancient and has.
So you broke up a little bit then, Kat. Did you say the Tully's looking down on the Starks?
Yeah. Did you feel like there was a bit of condescension there?
Maybe a little bit. Yeah, it didn't really jump out at me, to be honest.
I'm just totally triggered when Kat starts talking.
Yeah.
I always feel she's put the pull for her towards the Tullys is far too strong. And even the way she talks about Rob and how, you know, he looked like Edmure, and who, you know, by all accounts doesn't, from what she said of him so far, doesn't demand the most amount of respect from the reader. And now she's saying Rob looked like Edmure, he looked like such a Tully. And then she does say that Ned taught him well, but she's so certain she's going back to Winterfell, and then at the end of this chapter she decides she's not going, which I found surprising, to be honest. I don't see why she needs to go.
Well, this is another alternative history, isn't it? It's kind of like, why didn't Cat go to Winterfell as a husband, as Ned requested? Well, actually, did he ask her to go to Mount Catelyn? He asked her to go back to Winterfell and
secure the north. Isn't that what he said?
And secure the north and like mount a defense at Mount Catelyn, I'm sure. But that's what Ned requested. That's certainly what Rob wants, and I'm sure it's what our other sons want at Winterfell. So why did she just walk straight into battle, into her son's like battle command? Why not go to Winterfell with Roderick? Because Roderick Cassel, is it? Yeah. And he, you know, she just, you know, she sends him back up there to be Castellan. But I don't understand why she's not gone to Winterfell. And it was Stuart who was saying, what were the consequences of Cat not going to Winterfell? And it's like, oh my God, well, she let Jaime go. She never sees her sons again. She messes up this broker in this marriage promise relationship between Rob and a Frey, and it just the whole things were a million times worse with Cat being there. If she'd have just gone back to Winterfell, I think it would have been again alternative history. It would have been a completely different story.
I mean, the outcome is the same either way for the Tullys, right?
Oh yeah,
the outcome is going to be the same anyway.
Yeah,
they have no way of telling that at this stage. But Edmure doesn't have children. Like, she has no reason to go there.
She just doesn't want to go back to the north. Do you think she just wants to hang around
I think
the
there's
Riverlands?
A huge pull in Cat between being a Stark and being a Tully. And as I was saying, that thing where like Brendan is completely just looking down on the Starks, like, Mo Catelyn, this place is crap. Like, why are we here? And like Cat immediately starts to defend the Starks and say, no, Ned said that this place is really important. This place is where the first men were. This is like at night the ghosts come alive, and you know there's a lot here. Which for a Tully, that's a bit of a strange thing to say. That's a very northern argument to make. And when she goes straight in to see Rob, Greywind sees her and comes over and starts, you know, nipping at her hand, and you know, she's still at that stage very much like, I saw the direwolf banner, that's all I want, I just want to go home to Winterfell. And then she says how Lysa was a fool in front of everybody, and she immediately regrets it. And from that point, that's when she starts retreating into the Tully. She starts, I think, there's some sort of like guilt or something in her for having insulted Lysa, even though Lysa threatened to throw out the moon door because she simply asked, would it not be better to take Robert north to Winterfell?
Yeah, but you know, family duty honor, so she's always going to be thinking that. I also, I don't know, it just makes me wonder whether or not Cat knows that Hoster sent Cat north. He arranged that marriage initially between Bran, that didn't work, and then it had to be Ned.
Yeah.
And I don't know if she even wants to go back to the north. I think she's quite happy with where she is at the moment, and I think the fact that she knows her father is on his deathbed and isn't going to demand that what you're doing, just get yourself back up to Winterfell. You're the Lady of Winterfell. So maybe that's one of the reasons why she's kind of hanging around. I mean, ultimately, she becomes this machine of vengeance, you know, raining vengeance on Freys and any associated kind of like the enemy in the Riverlands, exactly in that location. I mean, she does a little bit of traveling, but she never goes back up north, does she? Never goes north.
And this is the infuriating thing about Kat's character, because she gives you with one hand, she gives you the absolute truth. You know, she says to Robb, remember, they're your bannermen, they're not your friends. Like, instantly, like warning him, don't trust them. You know, they're loyal to a point, you know. But then, like, as you're saying, like, she goes with the Tullys rather than staying with Robb. And I don't know why she has this thing from the beginning, from I think it was Cat 1, where she said that she let go of Sansa and Arya in her heart. It might have been Cat 2. And when Robb does the same, when Robb says, come on, Dad and Sansa, they're basically dead, right? Let's just face it, they're dead. We're not getting them back now. Now that you've let Tyrion go, we're not getting them back. And he will say this over and over again when it comes to the girls later on in Clash as well. But Kat, who was so happy to let them go as soon as she found out they were just going to King's Landing freely, not even as prisoners, now when they actually pretty much are gone, she just says, no, we have to do everything we can to get them back, and it's all family duty. Like, it's just, it's infuriating the way her mind works.
She goes into like taking hostages and swapping, and
But I feel like if we went north now, the biggest thing that wouldn't happen and would be the biggest problem for the world is Bran wouldn't go on to become Bran the Green Seer. I don't think she definitely wouldn't let Bran leave, or he wouldn't have an opportunity to leave potentially. So again, as I've said before, there's evidence, not so much in this chapter, but there's evidence in other chapters that Kat, because she's in two minds about things and she does contradictory things all the time, I think there's evidence to suggest that she is being manipulated. Maybe not this far south, but there's something not right with the way she thinks half the time. But it's
a funny one. It is a strange one. I think it's worth noting as well in this chapter that in Winterfell there were 12,000 northern men that gathered under Robb's command, and at this stage at Moat Cailin there are 18,000. So another 6 have joined from the Riverlands.
Who's that? Who would that be?
That would be Edmure's men.
Edmure's men, okay. And we also get mention of Howland Reed in this chapter, about how Howland Reed wouldn't be able to hold the neck. Why can't they help Howland Reed hold the neck?
I just like, why are they fighting at this point? Why has it got this far?
I don't know why it's being ramped up at all, actually. Who is pushing Robb out of Winterfell? That's my big thing. We have Lewin, and we have all these northern lords who didn't bother showing up for Robert when their actual king came, but now they're moving, who they will soon name king, down south. It's like a really elaborate...
where did you get this, like, we have to ride south? We have to ride south. Because even again, Osha and Bran, by the end of his chapter, were like, no, maybe you are going the wrong way. And
the other thing, just the last thing that I have is, when Brendan looks at Mo Cailin, and he said, look at it, and Cat finished his sentence, it's a death trap. And it's just like, this is where the beginnings of the foreshadowing for what's going to happen with Robb and Cat.
And I mean, there's a massive one here where Robb says, Roose Bolton, that man scares me, and it's like, oh god, that's
Yeah, no.
I mean, I think there's a lot in here though about just because it's about the marriage and brokering marriage and having marriages arranged, and doesn't necessarily mean that you will end up marrying your betrothed. So again, just going back to, like, you know, it should have been Cat and Brendan, ended up being Ned. It should have been Cersei and Rhaegar, ended up being Robert. It should have been Robert and Lyanna, ended up Lyanna. And, you know, everyone seemed to kind of mix things around. And also this seems to potentially be happening in this generation as well. And that's the thing that seems to be causing all the problems, not
marrying the right
not anything else. It's just like, you know, losing a girl, or
who should Rob
you know,
marry at this stage? Like, I feel like one of those Northern Lords, it's like they're all kind of rushing around trying to get their dance card filled. Like, which one should he?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose he could have his choice. I think. I also think that if it had been anybody else but Cat, they would have marched into the towers, the twins, and demanded that Frey cooperate.
Yeah.
Bearing in mind who his liege lord was, who the lord of the, you know, and demand that, not have to kowtow to him, and promise that especially when we already know at this stage this issue of marriage and betrothal and not marrying and just mixing things around, running off with people, disappearing, starting wars, and it causes massive problems. So why would Kat agree to go down that road? She should have just walked in and said, no, forget this betrothal nonsense. We're not going to be marrying into any phrase. You do what we tell you. My father is your liege lord. You will cooperate with us moving through the Green Fork or wherever they are.
Yeah, so my question is, why can't she say that? Because clearly Hoster has said that for decades with Edmure.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense, no.
So I'm with you. I don't really understand that. It's almost like she's willing the Red Wedding to happen. In a way, when you're reading Ned,
she's given away too much already. If it comes to a battle of wills, that conversation between Cat, I mean, I think we get that in the books, don't we? We get Cat
we do
having the conversation. So I'd be interested to see, based on what I'm imagining and assuming, I feel as though Walder Frey completely wiped the floor with her and got one over on her and got married into, again, this power vacuum.
Smarter as well, though.
Yeah, and she's messed up, like massively messed up.
Yeah, it is one of those things as well that we are going to be propelled towards that Red Wedding, because that is one of the things that he had in his head. He knew he wanted to recreate this Red Wedding, this Red Wedding scene. He knew he wanted to do that, so he is setting it all up.
John is saying, but Frey gave him 3,000 men. Yeah, but I mean, he could have demanded that. He could have demanded that in his own name as King of the North, as he'll be proclaimed later, but certainly as a Cat in her father's name.
Or Edmure.
Could have made more demands. I think they got thrown over a barrel by the Freys, to be honest with you. And I think a lot of that was maybe that wouldn't have worked out that way if it was perhaps a Blackfish trying to broker an agreement.
And again, we don't know how much Roose and Tywin are manipulating Frey and emboldening him to make that.
Yeah.
Because they're not getting... I feel like there's no confidence coming from Cat and Rob as well. Like, they feel they don't move forward with certainty, like she says, or move forward with confidence. Like, that's whatever you can say about Ned. I mean, he's pretty blind, but he's very confident that he's right, and he's very confident that he's got the moral upper hand.
Yeah.
So it doesn't end up being very good for him, but at least he's decisive in a way.
It doesn't seem very strategic. It seems quite like blustering into, you've got to win in the field, you've got to win every battle, you've got to, it's kind of like, it's just blustering into it without thinking.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, well, that's all I had for Cat 8. So next week we have a Tyrion sandwich. We're
yes, we do.
reading
Yeah.
Tyrion 7 to Tyrion 8, which is chapters 56 to 62. I have no idea who comes between because I forgot to check. But John is going to join us next week, so that'll be great fun.
That'd be wonderful. Yeah. So, John, it's 7 chapters. Tyrion 7, which is chapter 56. Yeah, I think you just said this, Kat, but to Tyrion 8, chapter 62. So it's only 7. It's 7 chapters. So,
and I'm
like
sure,
chapter a night.
we're ramping up towards the end, so I'm sure even if you don't get to read them all, you'll still be able to. You'll know the books already so well, so that you'll be able to take part. And yeah, if you want to message me, John, I can email you or do something.
I think I think we can literally just get John to join from where we are. I think.
Oh, really? Oh, let me do that.
I think so. Or we on Google. We can just add John. I think on Google Hangout.
Well, I'll add him as a moderator right now, so then he'll be all in blue. Okay, I think so, but I couldn't find him on Google Hangouts. I was looking for him there.
But it's 7 p.m. So what would that be?
Yeah, so John, it's 7 p.m. UK time, so whatever that is for you. Sonny, thank you so much for joining us again, and thanks to Simon as well. And thank you, Claire.
Thank you. Yeah, no problem.
John,
see you next week.
We'll figure it out. You can. Oh, perfect. I'll email you straight away. Excellent.
Fantastic.
Okay, so thank you everybody for watching, and we'll see you next week for our Tyrion sandwich. Excellent. Thanks, Claire.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.